All right.
We've got 3 cameras on this.
3 cameras.
This is an expensive podcast.
For the first one, yeah, it is. All right, this is the first episode of Beyond the Edge of Night.
Beyond the Edge of Night. I'm going to get it too. It's like it just showed up today, right?
Yeah.
Beyond the Edge of Night. I love the title. That means we can talk about anything.
Talk about whatever we want. So talk about a little, like, what's the point of the podcast for you? What are you wanting to accomplish with this? So
I always liked people's podcasts, and there's one in particular. I like the format that, and we can talk about that later, but podcast is a great platform to talk about ideas, share ideas and concepts, bring on guests, promote a lot of this wild stuff that you ever go somewhere and you go, man, somebody ought to do this. Someone should say that.
Definitely.
Well, okay, we can do that and say that. And that's what's fun about a podcast. Mm-hmm. You can kind of, you can say what you want. I see products all the time. I'm like, oh man, I like this. I want to share it with people. What's a great platform for it? Well, our own podcast is a great platform
100%.
for that. So there's a lot of great things about podcasts you can do. It's the other thing I like that it's on the fly, and this one will be recorded and then
distributed.
But we're eventually going to have this podcast live on a platform where it will be the live unedited version, and then we'll have the YouTube version.
Correct. Yeah.
We'll have the
audio
PG-13
only
version,
and then the video that people can watch. A lot of people. So, obviously, for those that are just listening, you recognize Jason's voice. Don't necessarily know who I am. So I'm a part of the team that is doing all of this stuff with Jason and their team. So Forged, the YouTube channel, the podcast, the live streams. If you've tuned into any of the live streams, I'm the man behind the curtain that replies back to your comments and doesn't know what he's talking about.
I am Oz. I just want to call you Oz from now on since you said
that. Yeah, I'll be Oz.
Gosh.
That'll work.
Do you remember when you could see a movie in the theater and then 6 or 7 years later it would show up as a made-for-TV movie?
No.
No, you don't.
I was born in 95, so I've always had made-for-TV movies and VHSs and all that.
I mean, it was even like that on HBO. And like I was a kid, like if a movie came out in the 80s, it would show up on HBO 4 or 5 years later. Or maybe even longer, I don't know. But now it's like
2 weeks.
2 weeks,
yeah,
boom.
Maybe.
Which may be a cool thing.
Yeah, some of them just go straight out.
They go straight out.
I've seen a lot of people since we asked about, there's an alarming amount of people that don't even know what a podcast is that's in your audience.
You know what part I don't understand? I know what a cast is, but I don't know what the pod part is. Like, what does that have to do with it?
There is a history of podcasts. The guy's name is escaping me, but he just came up with that phrase, and he's known as the Podfather. It was like the first podcast, if I'm not mistaken, happened in like mid-90s.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. There's a guy that they talk about him on Joe Rogan's show a lot who actually started it. He's a comedian or an actor or something like that. So one thing that people kept saying on the comments was like, what's going to be, like, are you going to talk about knife tips? But this is more of like, talk about, this is a
how
audio
it all ties
thing.
them together.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I want to, here's the whole idea. There's a lot of idealistic and mythological and all these things about knife making, but there's also the reality of it, like the real life of a bladesmith and knife maker and artist, and then bringing these other real lives into this show. I mean, because it's a show.
It's a show,
and that's what we want it to be, a platform so we can talk about all kind of stuff. What makes it work? How does it work? And it's unlimited. And the nice thing about a podcast is it is unlimited. It's unscripted. It's unlimited. From time to time, we will be able to have guests. Some of them will be cool and we'll like them, and some of them maybe full of crap. I don't know, but we'll
100%.
find out when we get them on here.
That's the point.
Like, I don't necessarily have to like everybody that we have on here, but like I have a lot of ideas like, ooh, I like to have this person on. I like to have that person on. But I also like to ask questions that they'll be like,
kind of taken
crickets.
aback. Yeah. That's when you put 3 cameras on people and 2 lights, and you have microphones on people. People get uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So you kind of get to see who's full of shit and who's not. I mean, so I think it's going to be cool.
It is going to be cool. I don't have to think. I know it's going to be cool.
Yeah.
I didn't wear my time travel watch today because I wanted to avoid any of the looking into that already because, I don't want to influence. I always want it to be a surprise.
That's cool.
So
That
that's
makes
the
a lot
thing
of
I'm
sense.
trying to stay away from.
So for people that are listening to this that only know you from that show on TV, who are you?
I am Jason Knight. I am a bladesmith. I am a maker. I'm an artist. I'm a sculptor. I'm a husband. I'm a dad. I'm a troublemaker.
That's for sure.
I wanted to. I'm controversial, I guess.
Yep, you are.
I don't try to be a rebel because I don't really want to be, and I'm not trying to be an outlaw or anything because I don't really want to be. But I guess sometimes I am. I like to travel and wander, but I'm not as rugged as I look.
That is a very accurate
I
statement.
like to sleep in fancy hotels as opposed to the ground. Now, I don't mind sleeping on the ground. I grew up in the deep south, like right outside of Charleston in the swamp. So camping there sucked. So when I think about being rugged, I'm like, it's going to be wet and sweaty and bug infested. Now, a lot of people who camp out west, they don't even know what that is. Like, oh, we camp all the time, all year round. I'm
Weather's
like,
great. Yeah.
you could just sleep outside on a damn blanket. I mean, what's the big deal? That's like, I could do that, not a big deal. But so what's cool is we have moved here to East Tennessee, which I think it is a very beautiful place, and the people aren't quite that friendly, but I'm getting used to it, and I like it just fine. Because maybe I don't want everybody to be so friendly, what I mean?
You're one of the first people I've heard say that. There's always that stigma of Southern hospitality, but I would agree that, especially in this part of Tennessee, there's a lot of clickiness. Like people have their crowd that they roll with.
Well, I understood there's an interesting history too. This was its own. It was, how people talk about being Texans.
Yeah.
This kind of was its own country at one time.
It was the state of Franklin.
It was the state of Franklin, and that was a long time ago. So it's a really interesting place. And the longer we're here, the more I grasp the realities of living here, but I also love it more.
Absolutely.
And the truth is we developed, we over our lives we developed solid friendships with certain people, and it is difficult at best. And I'm not looking to be friends with everybody. I try to be a good neighbor to the neighbors, even if I don't like the neighbors, even if they burn trash, and I may turn them over to the narcotics department of the local police because I think they're making meth. But I'm gonna do that because that protects them from me. Honestly, I'm like,
well, yeah,
I'm protecting them from me and what I want to do. So I don't know that you can take that however you want to take it.
That's a separate podcast series.
It's a separate podcast series.
You'd have to write a fictional
I
character
don't
about
call
yourself.
the cops.
Yeah.
But I want to protect my neighbors from my idea of how to solve the problem.
Maybe you do need to write a separate fictional character about yourself. He would be a time-traveling barbarian type that also was like a vigilante.
Gru the Wanderer. It was a comic book, I think, produced in the 80s.
Oh.
Might have been more similar to that. But
Sounds
I
about
just
right.
noticed something about this. We can blur this out because this character used to have doot doot. It wasn't covered with hair. It's a hairy-chested
It's a mermaid, right?
two fish legs on that.
For those of you that are only listening, we're talking about a Starbucks cup.
Dagon.
Okay, so you talked about your time travel watch a little bit a second ago.
That's just for fun. It's not real.
Okay.
I'm just saying, let's make it clear.
You know.
It's not real.
Oh, okay. Got it. Gotcha. So, in your time travels, what period have you gone back to that you think you belong in, or that you were supposed to be alive in? I know you've thought
Is
about
that one
this.
of the questions?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of funny because I really struggle with this one. You ever ride through the country or anywhere and you see an old farm, and it's a big farm,
Right.
and you see the ruins of the farm. Now, there's some cattle still wandering around out there, but there's grain silos with no grain in them, and there's rusty equipment. And I've seen this all over America. We've literally driven all over the United States, from the Dakotas to California, and I see the ruins of this time, and I don't know when that time actually was, because even when I was a kid, and that was in the late 70s and early 80s, I remember seeing this stuff, and my cousins had a farm, and by that time, they weren't wealthy, they couldn't really afford to grow anything, and it was a strange time. And then they grew a lot of tobacco where we lived locally, and there were some tobacco barns, but for the most part, even the tobacco barns they weren't using them anymore. It was over. It's a time that had passed. And I don't know really when that time was, and that fascinates me.
That is cool. I love stuff like that.
It may be that same era when, the Ford Motor Company had raw materials going in one end of their building, like iron ore, the stuff to make, they made the glass, the paint, and everything, and out came a car. And that's really cool. Now, that time is gone now.
Yep.
That time doesn't exist anymore. But that fascinates me. That era fascinates me. And maybe, not necessarily that our growing food or our manufacturing goods was better at that time, but we actually did it.
Yeah.
It was actually done. It was a thing. And that fascinates me. And the whole concept of when was America not in a war or a conflict, that fascinates me, because I don't know if that ever was a time that existed.
Not really, yeah.
So there's not really, there's an illusion. We have these illusions of peace and prosperity. Illusions.
Very much so.
And one of the things I love about making knives and tying this in to relative is I enjoy taking a piece of steel and forging it into a blade, whether that is a hunting knife or a kitchen knife or some phantasmagorical, let me get all the syllables together, phantasmagorical piece, phantasmagoria, just something that is fit for some off-world whatever, that intrigues me. I love the thoughts and concepts of it. I think about art, artist-wise, my favorite artists would be first Frank Frazetta.
Okay. I don't know who that is.
Frazetta redefined the whole concept of action and motion in fantasy art.
Oh, okay.
But he's from another time.
Right.
And I think his time is, he passed on years ago, but in the late 60s, early 70s, into the early 80s, it was just like the guy to do album cover, the guy to do the movie poster.
Oh, sweet.
He did stuff for Clint Eastwood and a lot of all kind of stuff like that. But that time, it's an interesting thing. I might have been born at the end of it, as it 72. That was all dying or gone. So we're looking at the ruins of an era. What was that? That's fascinating.
For sure.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, we're like, when you talk about movies and traditional Hollywood and things like that, and I like to think of how much that stuff cost. Like, just thinking about where we're at now, like last year, there was like 3 movies that were shot completely on iPhone.
Yeah.
So like moving, your thing is now moving into YouTube, an online platform. It's been around for I think 2007 was the first year that YouTube actually started, so it's still in like its early infancy days. But talk about your experience with that. You've told me about you love the community aspect of it, how engaging it is compared to your other things.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. So I'm not sure how long we've been on Facebook and Instagram, but they were lightly touched upon by me using them as a tool to reach the public, to show people, here's what I'm doing, here's what I'm making, or sharing information. I didn't use them a lot. I didn't really understand the dynamic of it. And then in the last 2 years, I've really started using Instagram. But Instagram is fickle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like people on Instagram are like, oh, I like that. Oh, I'll follow you. I'm not going to follow you. So like, what do we have every day? Well, the analytics are like, we have 100 new people follow us every day on Instagram, but 20 people unfollow us.
Yep.
Which I think it's cool, but it's fun, but it's always building. You know, we're almost at 100,000. And out of 100,000, if I post a video, they'll get 7,000 to 10,000 views, and we'll get so many likes and so many comments. And one of the things that I've had to get is like people. There's a group of professional trolls out there.
Oh yeah, that's all they live to do.
They are paid to leave ignorant commentary.
Yeah.
And what's funny is that just makes your YouTube video more popular.
Yeah, that's what's been crazy about your YouTube channel, though,
YouTube.
is like the vast majority of the audience that you have on YouTube is just like eager to eat up your content. If we get 200 comments on a video, legitimately 2 or 3 of those comments are idiots. It's like, just leave those. The rest of the people will eat that person alive.
Yeah, that's right. That's what's fun about it. And Facebook is different because most of the people early on, I knew everybody on my Facebook.
Right.
I was like, oh, that's what, and then you go to the Facebook fan page, and then you get a whole nother crew. And, I really want to express why is it important? What does it mean? If it were truly up to me, there was a time where I thought I wanted to be more recognized. I wanted the work I was doing to be more recognized. I wanted to be more popular. But even before this stuff, even before I was using this platform, even before I ever did anything on television or YouTube or anything, my work spoke for itself, and it was already popular.
Right.
And the problem that I always have had is supplying the demand. And that has always been the issue. I could never, even before I was ever on any social media or History Channel, anything, I was never able to meet the demand for the pieces that I was making.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And how do you deal with that? What do you do? Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Since then, I've figured out some alternates. I've lent designs to people since I began to have recognizable designs. People would say, hey, you want to use this? I was like, all right, it's yours, you can use it. But I don't want to lose the point, and the point is, why are we doing this? Well, if it were up to me, I would disappear into obscurity. No one would ever see or hear from me again, and I'd live a quiet life making knives and enjoying my family and enjoying my friends and enjoying the art and the craft and learning that and becoming better at it without all of this. But I want to inspire a generation of people to be makers. And the only way to do it is using these platforms to promote that there is a fine craft that I always hope is pushing the envelope of art all the time, and that's bladesmithing.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to make knives for any other reason except for the sake of, I make knives or swords. Nobody's using swords in a moniker, but I love to make swords. It's such a cool thing. It's so impressive to pick up a real sword. It's like, it really has evil in it because it wants you to cut somebody. Yeah. It's like, I want to cut something. Don't touch it. Put it down. But the reason is like this is something that should be kept alive. In America, I don't know what our culture is. I don't know what our culture even looks like anymore. But what if part of our culture, what if a faction of our culture was the maker culture, the culture of makers? And these makers they're forging blades, they're making pottery, they're painting pictures, they're writing poetry, they're making music.
Right.
That's the most recognizable, obviously, is the music scene. Nowadays, the most popular is like the worst music, it seems like. Every now and then good stuff slips through, but that's another subject altogether. But the whole reason I'm doing this is because I want people to be makers. That's why I say be a maker. And whatever that is that you are making, we take for granted our liberties here, our freedom, like the water in Kingsport, for an example. It may not be the tastiest of water, but you can drink it, and it won't kill you.
Well.
But let's just say I was in Nicaragua one time, and you don't drink that water.
Right.
And I'm sure at one time it was fine, but like that's just not water you can drink unless you grew up there and you have all these special enzymes and bacteria living in you to be like, hey, I can deal with that. I can deal with that. One sip of that for me would be like number 3,
right,
or number 4.
Number 4
at worst. But so we take for granted the benefit of just being Americans. But what does that mean? What does that look like? I don't want to get too crazy about it, but the sad truth is for us to be here, wherever our country of origin is, and it could be Ireland or England or, anywhere. It could be anywhere. It could be America. It could be, our ancestors could be Americans.
Yeah.
That culture is gone. And it really is up to us to say, what do I want this to look like for my posterity, for my future, for the children that I know or the other people that I may have around me or influence. So I want them to think about giving and making and sharing and making a difference.
Sure.
Being a maker also means making a difference in the community that I am in.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I'm accepted in that community or not, I was like, you know what? I'm going to be a bladesmith. I'm going to make knives. I'm going to make art. I'm going to share this craft. And I want it to grow, and I want people to enjoy it, and I want it to become their art.
Definitely. Yeah, it was funny because I was thinking about this today, and I explained it to somebody recently, but when we first set out to make Forged, and we can do an entire 5-week course on the process of that and just talk about that as much as we want. But when we set out to make Forged, it was about why you do what you do, but then looking into the future of that series, it's almost become like a historical thing, like a conservation project almost. It's like
It's a conservation, right? Yeah,
you're preserving.
That's a great way to say
you're
it.
preserving these methods and in the future with some of the master bladesmiths that know this craft better than anybody. So it's cool to be a part of like, okay, we're gonna archive all this stuff, give it to the people so that they can learn this craft themselves and carry it on. But these are the people that have carried this torch when no one else is looking.
That's right.
It's pretty cool.
That's right.
When you think about it like that.
It is. It's a good thing, and there are cultures that they're steeped in tradition, and it could be something we take tea for granted, as an example. And the Japanese and Chinese culture is a very important part of the culture. And there are ceremonies around tea and serving the tea and steeping the tea and how you do it. Also, I'll use another one. There's a video I shared a couple weeks ago, and I'm trying to control my emotions because it's so important and it's so cool that we have the tradition still. So the samurai sword is the most popular and famous sword in all the world for one reason, and never stopped making it.
Oh yeah.
Never stopped making it through all the whatever, every culture, every country goes through all their trials and tribulations. This one is specifically about Yoshindo Yoshihara. I hope I say it properly.
I saw that.
And I shared it, but like, I'm enamored with it because I have a book that is written about him. I met the authors of this book,
cool.
The Carps, and this was a long time ago when I'd first gotten into bladesmithing, about 2001 and 2, and I was making Bowie knives that had hamons, that had choji, and I was really focused. And I learned that tradition from a guy named Don Fogg. And I'm not sure where he learned it, but no one else was really showing the way this works, this way. And I was just like, I'm going to put it on Bowie knives, So I was trying to learn what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. But I was more fascinated with that than I was Damascus. And I was more fascinated with the tradition. But I realized, like, this tradition belongs to the Japanese people. And it is a beautiful thing. And there are so many subtleties about the swords that I respect and I honor, that it's not really for me to make. And so I make my version, I make like a bastardized version of it that we go and chop the woods down with. But that is a beautiful tradition that is protected, so much so in their country that like if you are licensed as a swordsmith, you can only make so many a year. And I don't even know what they cost. I can't imagine. We're talking about,
a lot.
Thousands of dollars, more than a Bugatti.
That's crazy. I didn't know that. I watched that video that you put up. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
One thing that I think we need to touch on that people do keep commenting about on the videos, so YouTube, on the way that YouTube works, and we're all learning this, if you have copywritten material, it'll pull a segment out of your video. So in your reaction to movies video, the segment of Conan the Barbarian got clipped out.
Yeah.
So for the people that are listening to this, let's give them a little exclusive and just talk about what that movie means to you, why you love it, why it gets a pass on everything that it's doing, because this has got to live somewhere.
So yeah, when you if you try and do a search for the best forging scenes in movies, you won't find any of them because they really don't exist.
That's how the video concept started. I was like, let's react to some cool stuff, but yeah, it doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist. But with the I guess this is the Dino De Laurentiis production of Conan the Barbarian. It was actually written by Oliver Stone. The music is produced by Basil Palladarius. I hope I'm saying that right. And he wrote some amazing soundtrack for music. So a lot of westerns, a lot of cool stuff. But that one is iconic. Everyone knows when you hear it. Dun, 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 that's like gives me the chills.
We can't play it.
We can't play it because we don't have the copyright for it. And then Jody Sampson is the man who actually made, I don't know who designed the swords. He may or may not. I don't know the backstory on it, but he made the movie swords. Bronze swords were cast in molds. Some of them, based on the information we have, but they were double-sided molds. And you can see examples of these in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. But in the Conan movie, they're pouring the steel into this shape of the original sword that they call it the father's sword. And then there's some forging on it with a lot of oil or something on the anvil because it's on fire. When you hit it, it's like, and that looks cool. It all looks cool.
Right.
I was a kid. You got to think about it from a 12-year-old or however old I was. Maybe I was only 9. I don't know. I don't remember what year it was. 82. So I was 10 years old or 9 years old. That was the most influential movie scene that I ever seen in my whole life. I was like, oh, I got to do this. Mm-hmm. So that was why it was so important to me. And when I watch it today, it's not... Other people who don't think about it the same way I do, they can recognize this movie wasn't very well made.
But it's a classic.
But it was so much fun, and I love it still. I still love the movie. I'm sure we own it. But it's like one of those things. If you're a bladesmith and this part of the movie doesn't get you all choked up, you may rethink your life, about bladesmithing. This may not be your cup of tea, you know. Maybe you should find something else to do because you're probably not going to do well in it if you don't like this part of the movie. Even though it's completely wrong, even though it's completely inaccurate and stupid, it's wrong from the part where they pour the blade into the mold to the part where they sharpen it with a rock.
Right.
I mean, you can sharpen with a rock, but anyway,
right.
Quenching it in snow. I can tell you that doesn't work.
You tried.
Yeah, I tried that in the video. It just doesn't work. But you know what? It's fun and it's inspirational. And you combine some things. This is like how a video will go by. A theme, a soundtrack, and it's like I'm inspired now.
When all the elements come together.
When all the elements come together. So, yeah, it gets a pass on there because da-da-da-da-da. And the other fun part, when we did the top 10, it was the top 10 action movies of the 1980s.
By Time Magazine.
By Time Magazine, not by me.
Not your top 10.
You know, I have a different list, and maybe we will or we will not do that. I'm not sure, but as far as forging scenes in movies, I just
it was hard to find
with anything that's actually good or accurate. Mm-hmm. Now there's some good sword fight scenes in movies.
Yeah. And
they're not necessarily in English, but it's all in fun. The best sword movie is Princess Bride.
For sure.
Period, hands down.
That was the first thing you said to me when I came up with the list of top 10.
Yeah.
You were like, Princess Bride is
Princess Bride.
I didn't make the list. I didn't make the list, man.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
So when you think about, like, one thing that when we first started out on this journey of working together, you guys came to us to make a website, but me and Nick had met you before and filmed a little video with you. I had always thought, like, how do we incorporate not just bladesmithing, but just makers as a whole, just artists, craftspeople, all this kind of thing. Is there any artist or maker at this time that you would like to collaborate with in a different space? Or just like somebody's artwork that you just admire? Do you have anything like that you go to?
As far as knife making goes?
No, just in general.
In general,
yeah, preferably not knife making. Like, who's some cool things that you've seen? Who's doing some cool stuff?
Well, it changes. There's some stuff on, because I'm a bladesmith, I keep going back to bladesmithing, but
right.
There's a lot of things that I tell people look at instead of looking at knives if they want to be inspired. If you look at knives, you'll more than likely
copy.
Yeah, you want to copy that knife, and it's hard to not to do.
Yeah, I mean, very very hard not to do that.
Gosh, that's a good thing you stick me on the.
If you don't have anything, it's okay.
Well, collaborating with makers. I can talk about somebody who I have collaborated with several times, and they bring a lot of different ideas. My nose and my face is itching. I want to trim my beard, but I'm not going to cut it off.
Good plan.
I wanted to grow out like wavy.
You're getting a lot of good comments about the beard, so I don't think
I can't grow hair on my head, but I can grow a beard. I like working with Andrew Mears. And I can talk about some people that it's kind of funny because when Andrew Mears did his journeyman smith test, I was one of the judges, and I failed him. But I failed him for some things. They're not silly, but then I went to his table and I saw the other people. I was like, why didn't you put those pieces? And then he said, I thought this is what they would want to see. And I'm like, I get that. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But it wasn't because of finish or anything there, like crooked blade handle junction, but it wasn't a big deal. But I'm a very, like, if I'm ever asked to do those things, I'm like a professional killer.
Yeah,
like I'm looking to destroy your work and butcher it in every way possible. Otherwise, when I see how bad something is, I'm just trying to find it like, oh, well, I like your knife that is pointy and you have a green handle. That's cool. Can't hold that handle, but I like that it's pointy and the handle's green. Those are two good points on your knife.
Yeah, so I have deeply immersed myself in like the knife culture since starting this project, but that's one thing that I've still never understood. What is that process, like the different levels? And people listening to this are probably like driving their cars off into a ravine, like, how is this guy talking to a master bladesmith? But I don't understand.
Well, I'll use Mears for an example. So he had so many skills that I didn't even have a clue about when I first met him. I just started, and I'm just going to go down this pathway for a minute because I want to just touch on something too. I admire their work because they do a lot. When I see makers who do things I don't even understand how they do it, I want to work with them. When I see work that I understand how they do it, and it's just based on hours of polishing something, that doesn't interest me so much.
Right.
I'm not so interested in super crispy, clean fits and finishes as I am is the action and motion and art of the piece. Now, Mears is doing this thing where he's carving up the steel, he's putting in gold or silver, and he's carving like a tiger on it, and then he makes the steel black, and then put like sapphires in the eyes. I don't even know he does it, but it's like a reverse version of repoussé, and then inlay, and then carving. It's some Japanese description for it. I don't know what it's called, but it's so killer. I really dig it.
Yeah, it sounds awesome.
And then just and then doing asymmetrical things, like doing a dagger that may not necessarily be symmetrical on both sides. Like, that's kind of cool too.
Yeah.
And just one side of the blade is different than the other side of the blade. Those are nice. Those are fun because there's a lot more freedom in that. There, you're pushing the envelope, and we have a bunch of assumptions about what a thing is. And when you're making something that's like a dagger or a sword, the platform is, let's just say, sword. So this is something from a time that we don't know anyone that is alive from that time anymore. So we are not able to relate to the sword being a weapon so much as a platform to make art of or on. And so what he's doing is he's bringing all these different arts together: sculpture, design, the whole art and science of Damascus making, his crazy patterns and stuff, combining them all in one place, whether it's a folder or a sword or a dagger. And one of the most impressive makers to me, who I enjoy working with and hope to in the future again. As far as other artists go, sometimes it's difficult to bring them into a project where you're working on knives because the palettes tend to be small in dimension, you know, and so it's difficult to bring in another artist to work on an idea. Now, conceptually, you can do this. You can say, hey, I like your concept art. Why don't you design me your version of that one thing that we're talking about that would be made out of the Beskar?
Yes.
You know, I want to see this person's version of it, and I want to make that. And there's certain people, I will make a design. I'll make a concept design. That's not my design, and I might tweak it a little bit. But there's other people, like, I have regrets about working with some people in the past design-wise. I'm like, I should have never worked with this novice or this, you know, there's people, they didn't deserve, and this is not me being arrogant, they really didn't deserve my attention, but because of the place and the time that I was in, I felt like, hey, this will be cool because I like them and I want to help and promote what they're doing. But, you know, in the end game, I was just taken advantage of. So I'm real hesitant to work with other makers who aren't like really giving it everything they got. You know what I mean? Like, I always think about putting the Mike Tyson into it. You know, like Mike Tyson was, you love him or hate him, but like that was the baddest man ever got in a boxing ring. You know, and like when you talk to him now, I don't talk to him. I mean, it's when you watch an interview, he's like, he's humble and he's quiet and he's like, oh, well, I have no idea why I had a tiger. I just had so much money I didn't know what to do with, and I was pretty stupid. So, but the point being is, like, you're giving it, this is your thing. Like, this is like, I am this. I am a bladesmith, not a businessman or a shyster, you know, and you run into these people and it's difficult. And you should always listen to the other people who love you and say, stay away from these chumps.
Yeah, and it's like people, nowadays it's more valuable to be a specialist than a jack of all trades. At one point in time, it was like, if you can do a little bit of everything kind of good, then you're whatever. But now it's the specialists. So I think you'll start seeing more like what you did, reaching out to other like professionals to do like what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Like there's some people that I know that just try and put things out there and just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks, really. And that's never
That's
a
what
great
monkeys
idea.
will do. That
Exactly.
a monkey will throw poo
At the wall.
and find that.
Or at
Oh,
each
look
other.
at that. That's art.
Yeah.
And it's like that's not art.
Yeah. So it's about taking pride in what you do. I mean, you 100% take a lot of pride in what you do.
I enjoy it, and I go through these stages too. I had some other knife makers that I really admire and I love, and they're like, "Why are you on this? When are you going to get back to grinding things?" Like. I was like, I'm in this Picasso stage where like I like to sketch on napkins in a way. It's like Picasso would be like, "Oh, what's my bill for the restaurant? How about this sketch? Is that good? Does that cover it? Like, cool." But
Have you done that with a knife yet?
yeah, I've done that with knives. I've used knives to paper stuff, but it's funny because I get on a thing and I want to learn more about it, so I explore it.
Right.
Just like the Forge series, I wanted to share the elemental concept. Like, this is the most direct way with adding the complexity of the design, the complexity of the handle, and really the complexity of the heat treat. But even the more so when I realized it's like I couldn't forge like that when I first started.
Oh,
And
yeah.
in fact, it took me years to be able to forge like that. Years and years and years. But I don't want to teach people what I used to do. I want to teach people what I learn and what I know now. So it's like an arrow. So my technique for teaching is like, it's like this. It's like straight right into the target.
Yeah.
Not, let me show you this way that, and it's kind of funny if you go to a university or some other people, techniques for learning or whatever, they're going to teach you all the bullshit.
Right.
Before they qualify you to learn the thing
current
that
thing.
is good.
Yeah.
And I do not like that. I do not like wasting my time, and I do not want to waste other people's time.
Those are the most frustrating videos. Like you go on YouTube and it'll be a 20-minute how-to video on anything. Like trying to add a garbage disposal under your sink. Like you watch it for 8 minutes and then the person doing the video is like, "Oh, by the way, I forgot this step." And you have to go back and undo 15 things to get where you are. So I feel like our videos are very direct, to the point, but also entertaining. That's a side that people haven't seen of you because it wasn't portrayed that way. So that was one of the...
if you were portrayed as a grumpy ass,
Yeah.
grumpy person, if you have how many hours? Hours and hours and hours compiled into 45 minutes of going, like... Come on, man, that ain't me. It's not me.
Yeah, that's true. That was one of the first comments that came through when we started uploading onto YouTube was, "Wow, I never heard you laugh before." And I was like, "What? What does that even mean? I've never heard you be serious."
Yeah, that's right. I want people to be two things with the podcast, with YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all the stuff we're doing, even the Forge series. I want the information to come across clearly and directly, but I also want people to realize like it is serious, but also be lighthearted in your work. You can't do exactly what I'm doing, but you can take the techniques I'm sharing, make them your own, and rise to that level.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I hope surpass that level.
Absolutely.
I like to see people go past where I am, or where I, in my life. I don't know where I'll end up being, with my work, or where it's really going, because I always find some other thing that I'm interested in it, and I'll delve into it. And there's a lot of places right now. Like I used to do a lot of carving and sculpture. Like I really want to bring that back into my knife making. And when I see certain types of engraving, I'm like, oh, I should start doing that. I wouldn't mind doing that. But there's only so many hours in a day, and we also have another company. We have the Night Elements, and that is basically my designs that I put into production, and they are either made, some of them are made by Winkler knives, and those are specifically Winkler knives. They just say they have my JK on it. They don't say 9 elements. It has a JK with a gear, and they it's really wonderful being able to work with them.
Yeah.
And I mean the Winklers make the knives for the special operations. Everybody else goes, well, we make these ones. No, you don't. They make them. Nice. And it's really interesting. It's really nice to be able to meet some of these folks that we get to make these knives for. They have a terrible, terrible job, and it's wonderful to be able to provide them with a piece of gear that they help influence. That I needed to do this. I would like it to be like this. It needs to work this way. We need to carry it like this. It's really nice to even meet these folks. I mean, there's less of them than there are basketball and football stars.
Oh yeah. I mean,
you're less likely to run into them. So, and you're even less likely to be a knife maker who makes a knife for them.
That is cool.
And the Winklers do that, and it was nice working with them. I've known Daniel and Karen since I was a kid, so it was really cool being able to work with them. And they still produce a few of my designs, which is super cool.
Nice.
But what we've launched is taking these ideas, like how do we make this real? So we have some pieces that are made in Italy, and some other pieces are made in America. So it's either RMJ or now Patriot Blade Works, which is right here in Kingsport.
Oh, yeah.
And they're going to be making some what we call, I don't know if they're necessarily mid-techs, but we'll get the blades and finish them, and we'll do the final touching and sharpening and inspect, like, hey, yeah, these are right on the money, And the stuff that's made in Italy, it's made by Fox, which is a very good company. They're making our folding kukri, voodoo, folding. Yeah, I'll get you one.
Okay.
Some cool stuff. We actually won some awards for that a couple years ago under a different brand name, but these designs are being made now. Hopefully we'll be able to get them out there, get them into the market, and people can get their hands on a knife, because I can only make so many knives.
Yeah.
And like, I still don't know what we should do with the knives we made in the thing.
Yeah, that's
I
that's
have no
funny.
idea what we should do with that.
Yeah, because people that so when you watch a cooking show, this is how we explained it when we were producing this. When you watch a cooking show, they don't just sit and wait for the turkey to be done. Like, they have 8 turkeys sitting, waiting to come out of the oven. So when we produce Forged, there's just 8 knives sitting there waiting to be finished.
Yeah. And there's two that actually got finished.
Right.
And one somebody took and cut up some pallets, I think, and nicked the edge. I don't know who did that.
That was me. Very much so me.
Yeah, that was cool. That's what you're supposed to do. That's why I hate it when somebody goes, okay, there's a weird thing that I've been experiencing here. Folding knives. I've designed folding knives, and I have, I don't know how many of them, but pretty much one friend has all the folders that I've ever made.
Oh, cool.
And they're not available for sale, and they're never going to be.
Right.
And then when I do things now, I usually make a concept and then build it in SolidWorks or something. And I might even get some assistance from some other knife makers who understand. They're on the cutting edge of the mechanics of knives, like what works, what's hot, what's new. And I'll use these things in that knife, if I can. And there's a lot of very, very generous, famous knife makers out there. And they lend their time and their experience to me to help me be a better maker, and I really appreciate that. And that's another funny thing. So I always say, which one's better, forging or stock removal? I forge because that's my art.
Right.
I do stock removal because that's my art. You have to combine both of these to make knives. Most of my knives that you see on our, what we're doing, these are all forged, really all the way to finish. Like, we're really doing almost no grinding on it. It's very elemental. But I do knives that I make a piece of steel. There's machining on them, there's grinding on them, there's all kind of different methods of manufacture to get the end product. So I'm not trying to go off on a tangent about it, but it's always funny, the question is like, all the stainless is forged because it's made in an ingot, it goes to Niagara Specialty Metals, and they roll it out in the dimension that you want. And that process is called forging.
That's funny. That, like, if we could compile all of the repeat questions we get on YouTube and social media, it's like forging or stock removal. How do you get the blackened look on your blades. And there's one more that I always see. It might be about sharpening or something, but like just over and what type of steel? That's the other one. Yeah, what's your favorite kind
High
of
carbon steel.
Yeah, that's like people.
Steel that has carbon in it.
Okay, I think I've got one more thing before we wrap this up. I want to end it on a lighthearted note.
I feel like I forgot something. I was in the middle of saying a thing, and then when we forgot about it.
That will probably happen to us
right.
till the end of time. I like to, so a lot of the podcasts that I listen to end on a game. So I have a game for you.
Is it like a scary game?
I don't know.
There's not a machine that's going to rip my arm off if I get this wrong. I have them in the shop. Would you like me to show you?
We can see. Okay, so you and I are both avid beer drinkers.
I like beer.
We both like beer. The local watering hole is right next door to this very office.
Are they sponsoring this podcast?
No.
Okay, we're not going to say nothing about them then.
No. But that's probably where we'll go after said podcast. So I put together a little game. Most ridiculous beer names. So what I'm going to do is I have 5 names here of beers with a description about the alcohol content and the type of beer that it is.
These are actual ones that actually exist.
You have to tell me that.
Oh.
Is it real or is it fake?
All right.
There's got 5 of them. So we have the Citra Ass Down Double IPA, 8%, and for some reason it said it was not brewed by aliens or witches. Tell me if that's real or fake.
Real.
You are correct. The Barbarian Streisand IPA, American Pale Ale, 5.5%. Real or fake? Real?
I think it's real.
It is real. The AM Ale, beer for in the morning, goes great with the orange juice, 4.5%. Real or fake?
Real.
That one is fake.
That one's fake. You made that one up?
Yeah.
Oh.
The Circumcision Ale, pomegranate wit beer, 5%.
That's not real.
That one is real.
Who the hell would name their beer that? That's a stupid name for a beer.
Yeah.
I really want to drink one called that.
Well, it's only 5%, so
No,
it's
but listen
pretty...
to the name.
Oh,
Say
I
it
know.
again.
The Circumcision. That's the point.
Say it slower.
I got it. Okay, and last but not least, the Ark of the Covenant Ale, 4.0% wit beer.
That would be a way higher alcohol percentage. I'm going to say that one's fake.
That one is fake. It is the Ark of the Covenant Ale, and it is 4.0% to represent the 40 years that the Israelites walked through the desert.
Oh, man. That's funny.
All right. Well, I would say that you won that. You got 3 out of 5. I think that's good.
You know, there's a really interesting archaeological thing I was looking at. The Philistines had this beer container that was very ornate. And then they're showing like a Hebrew one. It was just simple and like practical, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. Well, this was it, man. Beyond the Edge of Night, episode 1 in the books.
How long did we do this for?
Probably like right at an hour. Am I right?
No.
Give or take. It's pretty good. You want to give a sign off? Anything you want to say?
Yeah, there were a lot of stuff I'm sure that I began to talk about, and then I hate when people start to say something and then they... What were we talking about?
Ending the podcast.
I know that. Well, I hope that we have many more. This is episode number 1, the pilot episode,
Absolutely.
The launch episode, the beginning, the alpha episode.
Yep, the inaugural episode.
The inaugural episode. I want this to be a high gravity kind of a podcast.
Like a 8% Citra Ass Down Double IPA, high gravity.
Now, based on that note, I have unfortunately been unable to partake in too potent of beers lately. It makes me very melancholy. And I'm learning, I was like, something's affected me. I changed my diet, and when I would have a beer, I was like,
there it is.
I can't do it. I just can't do it. But
makes a lot of sense.
I'm still like, I enjoy it's like the whole crafting of making beer. When no one could make anything else that they could sell, they made beer, and it became an epidemic across America. Or, not epidemic is probably not the word I want to use.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing. What would be a good version of that?
Wow.
The vocabulary here.
Yeah,
Take that in. I lost
What is
mine
that?
too.
What is that called?
I don't know. So we hope to see you again. Our goal is to do a podcast every.
Really, as much as we want to. I mean, I don't even, at least once a week I would like to.
Yeah, I like to do them once a week.
Yeah.
And what is the platform we'll be using this on?
So primarily we'll be on Apple Podcasts, really anywhere that podcasts can be listened to.
Okay, Apple Podcasts.
And so the way so YouTube's algorithm is you subscribe, you like, you comment, things go up. For podcasts, what we need people to do is subscribe and leave a review. When you leave a review, that pushes us up through all the noise.
Right. Subscribe and leave a review. This is important. If I have a simple rule that I learned a long time ago from a wise businessman, and he said, if you care, I care.
Yeah.
I'm going to break that down real quick, and then we'll sign off. I always care. But if you share that back, then we can always continue forward in this journey. And I like people to be on the journey with me as we explore these avenues, as we present the art and the science of making knives, or it could even be making alcohol. I mean, I'm just saying, you can put that in your car.
We could do that.
Boom. It's got to be what they run in the NASCAR track, because I don't smell gasoline the one time I went over there. But
I have no idea.
be a maker. Be a part of our podcast. You want to be a part of it, then leave a review.
Yep.
And go over to our YouTube and subscribe and leave a comment. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Facebook. And I hope you guys have a great day.